Devlin, Untamed.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Platform.
IRS, it's Only Sport. That's the name of the radio show. That's the name of this podcast. Martin Devlin, Lachlan War. If you want to listen to the show live every afternoon, 1 till 4, you've got to download the Platform app. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us on this podcast. Lay off the Wallabies. We need to support Australian rugby. Oh, police, stop telling us off and stop telling us what to do. Is that the worst take ever on Eddie Jones's mob getting coaled up the mine shaft by the Welsh? Yes, the answer is yes. Who cares whether Australian rugby is strong? Oh, when it's strong, New Zealand rugby's strong? No. I've never heard anyone sing that song. Netball. Is this the worst Silver Ferns side that we have seen in the last decade? Losing to England C? How do we resurrect our number one women's national team? Dame Noeline on the program. HK Wong talking NFL. Travis dating Tay-Tay. This is where life imitates art or art imitates sport. And the ATM podcast, Mark Watson. So much sport. We begin the show, tablets in hand. I say, gather my flock. It is time for a sermon. And get off your tally off, high horse. If I'm a fan and I'm sticking it to the Wallabies, that's my business. Let's go to the mountaintop.
We live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots.
Stop this garbage right now. Everyone who is peddling this line about how we need to support Australian rugby, how it's so vitally important to us here in New Zealand that they're successful, that we shouldn't be mocking the Wallabies for their ignominious early World Cup exit, that they need our love and cuddles. Oh, stop it, mate. Get a grip. The irony hearing all this is that it comes from the same waggy finger media types, the same tally-off media types who never ever, and that's never ever, will criticise or properly analyse New Zealand rugby or where we are at right now, which is also in the weakest, most incompetent administrative state that we've ever been in. Not fit for purpose. That's what the review says, and that's what the chairman of New Zealand Rugby says that they accept about themselves. How about cleaning up our own backyard before thinking about how we've got to help out and save our near neighbours? I couldn't give a rat's about Australian rugby. They're cash rich, they've told us. They got 100 million in the bank from next year's Lions tour already, they told us. And they're going to bank another 100 million from the next Rugby World Cup in 4 years' time, they told us. They're splashing cash all around every other rival code in Australia. A $6 million deal for Joseph Suali'i. So many players ready to cross rival codes, so we're told. Eddie Jones on board. The future couldn't be brighter, so we're told. Well, so what? Who cares? Not me, not ever. Their rugby is their rugby. We've got enough to worry about already here with where we're at, which is an average All Black side that is also staring down the barrel at being the worst ever that we've sent to a World Cup, and that's what they're going to be if we lose in the quarterfinal. We've got an administration that, as I just said, has admitted it knows it's a complete shambles. The review that concluded the governance of the game here is not fit for purpose. We've got domestic competitions which are dead. We've got a women's game costing tens of millions of dollars with no marketing or strategic plan attached to it to try at any stage to find some kind of financially viable future for it. Australia will do what they do, and they will make whatever decisions that they will make without giving a jot about where we are at or what we want. This is sport. The Wallabies are a rival. They lose. We stick the boot in. So lighten up, you finger-wagging tally offers. We, that's you and me who are listening, we're free to think whatever we want without being told off for doing so. Again, I don't give a rat's about the Wallabies in Australian rugby. When Aussie rugby is strong, New Zealand rugby is strong, I'm sorry, but I've never heard anyone sing that song.
Devlin.
What do you want? We want information. Information. You won't get it.
The Platform.
So, Lachlan, what have we got in the sports news headlines?
Plenty, Martin. Plenty as always. And a lot of it involves Eddie Jones, the Rugby World Cup in general, but Eddie Jones. I'll start off with this. All Blacks coaching great Sir Steve Hansen in the wake of the Wallabies' shock impending exit from the Rugby World Cup. Mathematically, they can still make the knockout stage. Let's hold on to that. Yep. Unless Portugal managed to actually do what seems very possible and beat them. Anyway, this is what Steve Hansen had to say this morning. I think he has been a great coach. He is still a great coach. It'd be really, really easy to turn around and talk about the coaching and the players, but the inconvenient facts are that Australian rugby needs an overhaul, and it has done so, has needed one for some time. France are reportedly attempting to fast-track Captain Antoine Dupont's return to the field with the use of a custom mask to protect his facial fracture. According to French publication Midi Olympique, Dupont will meet with a specialist to mould a mask to his face that adheres with World Rugby standards. This is in the hope of getting him ready for the knockout phase. The fate of Eddie Jones rests on a post-Rugby World Cup review with Rugby Australia boss Phil Waugh, saying the team has failed to make the grade. An external review will be held after the tournament following the Wallabies' disastrous campaign in France, which of course finishes up with a matchup against Portugal. Two teenage debutants have been named in Darren Baisley's first squad as permanent head coach of the All Whites, those being 18-year-old defender Tyler Binden and 19-year-old Fulham FC midfielder Matt Dibley-Diaz. It's a great name, Dibley-Diaz. What a name.
Great name.
Yeah, brilliant.
Brilliant. I love that guy already. Give it to Dibley-Diaz.
He should change his first name and make it start with D.
He should change his last name and make it Dobler. Dibley-Dobler. Then he'd be a bowler. Hey, I'm on it today.
It's the only joke you've made. What do you mean you're on it?
Okay, sorry. I've got to start
Jeez,
somewhere, mate. Come on.
Get a couple of Methvin ones out there and then, NRL referees boss Graham Annesley has confirmed what Reece Walsh, his former teammates at the Warriors, and the majority of fans at Suncorp Stadium probably already knew on Saturday night. Walsh's pass to Selwyn Cobber that set up a crucial try in the second half in Brisbane's 42-12 victory was seemingly forward, wasn't ruled forward, but Annesley, the NRL's head of football operations, has addressed the embarrassing blunder and confirms it was forward.
Right, in that case, replay the game. Replay the game.
No. We'd still win by 30. We might actually win by 36 next time. There's not a lot to say. It is a forward pass, Annesley said. There's no question about that. Well, then sort it out. Overhaul your bunker system. That, for the time being, Martin, is what is making news.
Devlin.
Unbelievable! Incredible!
The platform.
Aussie raconteur, larrikin, former Wallaby, journalist, writer, and general man to call about anything to do with the egg ball code in that country. Peter FitzSimons. Why should we care about Australian rugby? Why should we? All this hand-wringing about we shouldn't be mean to the Wallabies. Eddie Jones has done a dirty on you, mate. He's dating a Japanese girl at the same time saying he's in love with your Aussie sister. Come on, son. Eddie is really good at self-promotion and at disruption. He comes along, he does a little job for a couple of years, and then it all burns to hell. And he's done this time after time after time again, and we were all expecting it to happen perhaps in 2 or 3 years as opposed to today.
That's the truth. Yeah, but you're underselling him. He's got, he coached the Brumbies to win the Super Rugby in, 2001. He's a seriously accomplished coach. And, I absolutely agree that the track record is to get brilliant performances for 2 or 3 years and then they burn out. The classic example of which was, England didn't make the 2015, I don't think they got out of group stage like us.
Yeah.
That's right. And so in the space of 4 years, Eddie took them. I think they won their first 18 tests straight. Now, this is not somebody that doesn't know how to coach. This is somebody that coaches brutally but brilliantly. That's his track record, brutal, brilliant coaching. And so nobody could see coming that when all these things were happening over this last 6 months, where you've got five captains in 6 matches, where you've got, legends of the game being wiped out, when you've got whole swathes of senior players being left behind while Eddie takes the most junior team in the whole World Cup to France. All of those things were troubling. You go, well, that seems very odd to me, but it doesn't, Eddie surely knows what he's doing. And then you go, no, it's actually not working. And for me, quite seriously, emblematic of the whole thing, I went to, just before the World Cup started, I went to see the Wallabies train on the edge of Paris.
Yes, you did.
And I was stunned. It was my first Wallaby training in 20 years. And they coached. There was 30 guys out there on the pitch. There were 2 drones in the sky filming the whole thing. There were 3 guys on computers behind desks at the end, in the end goal, tabulating the whole thing. There would have been a support person or coach for every Wallaby on the field. I mean, you were 30 Wallabies and there had to have been at least as many coaches and support staff. So it was a multi-million-dollar operation with drones in the sky, and yet come the game against Fiji, The ball goes up twice. Nobody shouts out mine. And in the first one, Fiji scores. So I don't understand when you've got that level of sophistication that can tell you that Martin Devlin's pulse rate's been an average of 106.75. He's done 9,374 steps, and his blood glycerin, is up that shows he's tired and he needs to rest and blah, 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 blah. You've got that level of sophistication, and yet the basics, the bare basics of shouting out mine are left behind. And then against Fiji with a minute to go and Australia with one chance of holding the Fijians to a draw was to hold onto the ball. We just kept kicking it downfield. I don't understand how a team under the guidance of Eddie Jones, the most accomplished coach in the last 20 years, just, has ignored the basics.
All right, okay. Well, okay. What are you more upset about? Are you more upset about the fact that you have crashed out? I've got a couple of questions here. And where you've crashed out and you're going to come home before getting out of the group stage, which is the worst World Cup for a Wallaby side ever. Let's just add to that if the All Blacks go out in the quarterfinal, they'll come home as the worst All Black side ever to go to a World Cup as well, because we've lost a pool match, okay? And we're not necessarily a bad side. But, Peter, are you more upset about the form and the results, or the fact that he did a dirty and while he was dating you, he had a Tinder date with Japan? Because that, to me, is what everyone seems to be focusing on, and that's something that Eddie Jones owes the public of Australia, Wallaby rugby fans, and even his bosses an honest answer.
I agree with that your latter point. Now, a few people have said on social media, there are a few defenders of Eddie on social media, and they have said, look, it's not, if you, while working for the platform, let's just say, did an interview with News Talk ZB about going to them, that's sort of a bit understandable. That's the media world. That's the way it happens. But it's different in sport. If you are saying in the dressing room to guys, I want you to commit to this jersey, to bleed for this jersey. You're representing your country. And sorry, guys, I've just got to take a call. I've just got Japan on the other line. It does not work.
Yeah, right.
You
You're
cannot
right.
do that.
Yeah, you're right.
And I must say, Eddie sort of denied, saying, I don't know what you're talking about, mate. He sort of denied it, but it was very careful language that he used. And I can tell you, at the Herald, Sydney Morning Herald, we don't go to press on a story like that unless we've got it tied down every which way. Of course that story's true. And so, the question that needs to be put to Eddie, and I wasn't at the press conference, but the question that I would have put to Eddie at the press conference is, Eddie, you're sort of denying this, but let me ask you this. Would you agree that a national coach doing on a 5-year contract, not even up to 1 year on a 5-year contract, doing an interview for another nation a week before a World Cup, do you agree that if that were to prove to be true is firstly outrageous, and secondly, do you think it's a dismissible offence? What do you think? You're denying it happened, but let's just say, for argument's sake, it's true of another. What do you think of that? And I'd be fascinated to know his answer.
Oh, you know what he does. He'd just turn it around on its head and you just poke the borax at you, mate. Yes! Lachlan, we're about to play.
We need to talk.
A game you love.
We need to talk.
What is more chance of happening? Yes! I present you with a scenario, Lachlan, then I give you another scenario on top of that, and then you decide out of the two scenarios what you think is more chance of happening. Yes! Eddie Jones, mate, fesses up, admits he's been two-timing, and does the decent thing. Or Scotland beat Ireland and knock the Saffers out of the World Cup.
Okay, well, a lot of things would have to happen in terms of points difference for South Africa to be knocked out. I have no idea which one's more likely, because the first one ain't happening. The second one's not happening either. But I'd probably say there's more chance that Eddie Jones confesses to his sins than Scotland beating Ireland, which would then knock out South Africa.
Look, they've got a chance, Scotland, and they've got a chance because of the Six Nations and the history between the two countries.
But the points difference is the issue.
Okay.
South Africa's is like 80-something. Scotland's is only about 1.
Next! What is more chance of happening then? Eddie Jones fronts the cameras, very pious, and says, I made a mistake, and begs for forgiveness. But eventually gets kicked out of that job. Or Fiji lose to Georgia and Portugal and save Australia and Eddie's bacon and they still make the quarters.
The first one.
No chance that Fiji lose one of those.
Well, Fiji have to lose one and not get any bonus points, and Australia have to thump Portugal.
Which they will.
It could happen. Actually, no, I take that back.
Go on.
The second one's got more
The
chance of
second one's got
happening.
more chance of happening.
Well, because Fiji could lose to Georgia, absolutely. Georgia aren't too
That would be
bad.
such a shocker, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be? I mean, I don't want
You know what
Fiji,
would be- actually,
I
you
don't
know what
want
would be
Fiji to
funny?
miss out on the quarterfinals.
You know what would be
but I would
funny?
love Australia to get there by the back door.
I'd love that because then all the people who've written stories about their World Cup's over, they're coming home.
Come and help
Oh.
them. The New Zealand need to help them.
Next.
What is more chance of happening, mate? Eddie Jones admits that he's been talking to Japan about a new job and resigns. Or the NRL changed the forward pass rule before the start of next season.
Peter FitzSimons is already calling a review of the bunker in the off-season.
Yeah, but they reckon that they've tried two different types of technology, chipping the ball and lasers across the field, and neither have been unreliable because of that stupid ball going forward in motion bollocks.
No. That was clearly a forward pass.
Uh-huh.
All you need is the ability for the bunker to be able to go back and rule on it. You can't do that in a try-scoring situation like that for some
So
stupid
just
reason.
change that rule.
So just change that rule.
So that's got more chance
I
of
think
happening.
people know what a forward pass looks like.
I think most
well,
of us
maybe
do.
not in the NRL.
Well,
but
Jared Sutton obviously doesn't, does he?
the
And neither do
shorts
the
are too tight
line
that it's cutting off the circulation to make his eyes work.
What
That's
is
the
more
problem.
chance of happening? That Eddie Jones falls on his own sword here, or Antoine Dupont dons his Dupont his Thunderdome mask and returns to play for France in the quarterfinal.
Yeah, that's got more chance of happening.
He's playing the quarterfinal.
Yeah, I think he is, yeah.
He has to play the quarterfinal. It's such an important match for France, for everything about their rugby. This is their World Cup at home. Mm-hmm. They can't bomb out in the quarterfinals. They can't. And there's no way that they're going to rest him for the semi-final. He will play, won't he?
Yeah, and if there's a game he can skip to recover a bit more, it is probably the semi-final.
semi-final?
So, yeah.
What is more chance of happening than Eddie Jones, mate? Because do remember, ladies and gentlemen, when he was asked...
Did you do a job interview with Japanese Rugby a couple of weeks before the World Cup? And if so, what was the thinking?
I don't know what you're talking about, mate.
So what is more chance happening? Eddie Jones realises that he does know what the guy's talking about, or the Silver Ferns turn it around and win the next two tests versus England and win the Taini Jamison trophy.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I was caught off guard by this top text here. Sorry, can you repeat that?
Eddie Jones says he does know what the guy's talking about, the journalist is talking about, or the Silver Ferns win the next two tests and win
I think the Silver Ferns have a good chance.
more
Absolutely.
chance than Eddie?
Yeah, I think so.
Eddie's under a lot of pressure, mate.
Eddie is. Eddie also does not strike me as someone who can, or who will willingly admit that he did something wrong and say it publicly. I just don't think he'd do that. So I think, but look, the Silver Ferns on paper should be beating the England team.
beating the England
So
team.
I think them winning the next two matches is
It's not out of the
more
question,
no,
is it?
they should
And
be.
they were actually down by 8 or 9 goals on the weekend. They came back down by 1.
Next.
The top text that Lachlan's talking about is a guy called John has just texted, and thank you, John. He said points differential is behind head-to-head. So if Scotland beats South Africa, finish tied on points, and then Paul Scotland go through.
So it goes
They
bonus
beat South
points
Africa.
head to head. It should be points difference. It
Should be head-to-head, mate. It's got to be head-to-head.
No, it's got to be
Best team,
points
because I just beat you. So how? You know, but we got more points and more bonus points.
But if Scotland beat South Africa, South Africa will say, but we beat Ireland, who beat you?
We just stuffed you up the chutter, mate. We win.
Or
That's
vice
what it
versa,
is.
sorry. Well,
What is more chance of happening? Eddie Jones fronts a press conference and says, yes, the journalists were right. The Sydney Morning Herald was right. I'm not going to take defamation action because they were right, because I was talking to Japan. I will resign. Or Ben O'Keefe gets to ref the World Cup final.
Oh, I think that's got a great chance. I think it was brilliant.
Apart from the last decision where he panicked with Ireland and South Africa. He bottled that last decision.
In the mall?
Yeah. But apart from, I thought he was brilliant in that game. I thought his refereeing was clear. It was concise. He didn't fanny around. He didn't stop and start the game too much. He doesn't like the TMO in his ear that, constantly Ben O'Keefe. I think he's the best ref, and I think that they should give him that. But the only reason that they won't give him that is...
Well, he's a Kiwi?
if the All Blacks make the final.
Oh, if the All Blacks. Well, we're not making the
What
final.
is more chance of happening than Eddie Jones, mate, says yes. I was dating the Japanese girl at the same time I was married to you, Australian rugby. I'll leave. Or Man City win the EPL.
Really?
Really?
Manchester City
Really?
are going to waltz their way to the Premier
Do you think that they will?
Yes, they will.
They will. How many games do you think they're going to lose? 1 or 2?
I will say they'll lose 3.
3? I reckon they'll lose a garbage time game after they've won the title.
I think there'll be a point in time where they've got an FA Cup match and then a Champions League semi-final, quarter-final tie, and then a couple of Premier League games, and then they just drop points there. They lose a game there. I'd say they probably lose a game around Christmas where you play like 6 times in 12 days. And I reckon that one of Spurs, Arsenal, or Liverpool will manage to beat them at home.
Yeah, I think so. But they still win the title?
Oh, absolutely.
What chance of happening then, mate? Eddie Jones does what I don't think he will do, which is be man enough to say, hey, yeah, that's the truth. I don't know why I was doing it. I was just hedging my bets. I will resign. Or Max Verstappen wins the next GP in Qatar.
Cue Man City answer.
Yes! Silver Ferns in real crisis at the moment. Lost 5 in a row going back to the World Championships. Dame Noeline Taurua, World Championship winning coach, really got her hands full right now. Not copping it like Ian Foster, but a lot of questions being asked about whether or not Noeline is the right woman for the job to lead the Silver Ferns out of where they are at the moment. Game 2 in the Taini Jamison Trophy Series is on Wednesday. Dame Noeline joined us on the program. It's a tough job at times, isn't it? And it's probably never been tougher for you right now.
Yeah, look, hey, it definitely is. I'm not going to waver on that. And if we look at our results, not only from Netball World Cup, but also the loss that we recently had, it's not looking great. And, next game is going to be massive for us.
I've read a lot of comments from past players, Noeline, that, and they're saying not playing in Australia, not playing in that competition and just having our own domestic competition, that this is catching up with us. Do you agree with those comments?
Oh, look, I'm not going to shy away from those comments, but also I've heard, what happens when you do that, then you gut your domestic competition out as well. So that's what happened. And when we did ANZ, when I was there as coach with Magic, we played the Trans-Tasman, but we didn't have that next level coming in underneath as well. So I think there is a gap in our current system around having a bit of a Trans-Tasman. Now, whether it's club to club, like they do in rugby league, that's a possibility. And that's something that we've been able to talk about for a few years. So I think there's opportunities there in the system.
Yeah, and just off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe is there a possibility of having the two competitions dovetail into each other so we can get some of the imports that Australia have playing here and teach our girls as well? I mean, that's just a thought.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point as well. So it's, because if we go like a Trans-Tasman like we used to, then the development or the pathways within New Zealand is not going to be as strong. Whether we like it or not, we don't have the same resources. So we've only got so much dosh, much people. Yep. So we've got to be creative in what we do. And it's not as easy as throwing everything out, because when I look at Australia in comparison to us, we have 6-1. So they have 6 New Zealand players, 6 netball players. We only have 1. So the population is not the same. Just got to be a bit smarter as how we can do it and then get those relationships with Australia or England as to filling that.
How far behind are we right now? And I'm looking at the results over and also that World Championship as well. Are we a matter of just, 10 goals? And what does that translate to in your mind?
Yeah, Grace, for example, in Netball World Cup, she got injured maybe around the 3rd round. And when you have somebody like her, you're going to lose a volume shooter. That's sort of like having a Janelle out. Normally you can shoot, roughly around the volume of a 60-pointer. So at the moment we don't have that volume shooter, which is going to make a difference to the overall product of what we can put out there. So it's either with what we have, we've got to be able to be more mobile. We've got to be able to let that ball go and be able to withstand the pressure or the body contact. And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And that's probably the space that we're currently in at the moment.
How much do you personally want to turn this around? And is that enough for you to want to stay around in the job?
If I'm going to be honest, I for us to lose or be in that position in Netball World Cup, I absolutely hate it. And it's gut-wrenching, and it's something, that we pride ourselves on, being a past Silver Fern, also my responsibility in the head coach role. So I put my hand up on that. But I also keep the faith because it might be something with this current era and these current players that something may click, and I've got to sort of work into that space to try and find that connection. So, you know, there's moments there where we can hold it, but we're not consistent in regards to our ability to mentally tough it out when the pressure gets on and trust each other when those connections need to happen. But it will happen. You know, we just got to hurry that up in that process as much as we can and make sure that we work hard as much as possible and be smart.
I feel stupid by asking you this question because your track record speaks for itself. But, of course, these questions come up when teams aren't winning. Are you still the best person for the job, and do you believe that you are?
Yeah, to be honest, once again, and I think I'm pretty honest, I wonder. And, you know, these next couple of rounds with Taini Jamison playing against England and also Australia will not necessarily be able to answer that, but, you know, whether the gap widens or something else needs to change. So I'm contracted to the end of November and open once again to do what's required for the game. But also how we're going to better work together. I mean, I'm talking about myself and also the players to get a better connection and put something better out on court.
To hear the full interview, download the platform at the App Store. Via Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to the whole show and all of the interviews in full.
The Tight Five.
Where we have 5 separate sporting things, and when that goes ding, we move quickly on to the next one. Don't worry about Aussie rugby. Why are we being told off about this, Lachlan? What is the answer for New Zealand netball? You've listened to Dame Noeline Taurua live on the program about 20 minutes ago. Is she the right woman to coach this team? And is it as simple as saying, just get us back in that Australian competition? Pick your Rugby World Cup semi-finalists for me. No A-League players in the all-white squad of 22. What does that tell you? Antoine Dupont is set to do and I hope I pronounce this right, Harinadordequai. Is that right?
Harinadordequai, isn't it?
Oh, whatever. He's the guy from Mad Max Thunderdome. That's the mask that Dupont is going to wear in the quarterfinal.
Yeah, he's not. You know where he's from, right? He's a French rugby player.
He's from Mad Max Thunderdome, mate. And finally, Tay and Travis, are you jealous? Let's talk first about Aussie rugby. And don't be mean. Don't be mean to Australian rugby. It's so important that we worry about them and that we do everything we can to make Australian rugby strong. Yeah. Now, the argument about this is that if the Australian rugby playing population is really competitive, that will raise our game because we're going to be playing against better players. I think that there's an element to the validity of that argument.
Well, how much time do we have?
Well,
that's going to take a long time.
Exactly. You know, and also really with the problems that we have, should we not be focusing on fixing the ones that are in our backyard right now? Now, as I said earlier, there's a couple of solutions to this to me. The All Blacks are weak. We are the weakest All Black side that we've ever sent to a World Cup. Now, we might get lucky. We might win that quarterfinal. And I think we've got a puncher's chance of winning that final. Can we win 3 test matches in 15 days? Ooh, really, with this bunch of players who aren't allowed to play more than 5 Super Rugby games in a row? And you've got to remember when they play 5 Super Rugby games in a row, at least 2 or 3 of those are against crap teams, right?
Yeah.
So they're hardly testing themselves. Look, at the moment, I just don't care about Australian rugby enough to care. I really don't. I'm enjoying the fact that Eddie Jones is in hot water. I'm loving the fact that the Wallabies stink. They'll work their way out of it. They've got a Lions tour next year. They've got a World Cup in 4 years. They've got hundreds of millions of dollars, apparently. They'll buy their way out of it if they have to.
Yeah. I in terms of, if you're looking at Super Rugby and in terms of trying to make that better by having better players and makes for better competition, look, that's all well and fine. When Super Rugby was more or less in its heyday, there were 3 Australian teams. Not 3 good ones. There were just 3 Australian teams. The Brumbies, the Reds and the Waratahs. And for a long time, a very long time, the Reds were average.
Awful.
They were never great. The Waratahs were up and down. The Brumbies won some times.
It was never 3 strong teams out of Australia.
It was 1 strong, 1 there or thereabouts sometimes, and one who was always bottom of the table. Then they brought in a fourth team, the Western Force, which they didn't need to do, but they did it anyway.
Because they were up to 18 teams and 4 groups and things, and everyone qualifies.
And then the Force were all right a couple of years, and the Reds were still rubbish. And then the Reds got the Waratahs coach, and the Waratahs were bad.
Don't forget the South African teams were mostly rubbish. They couldn't travel,
Well, that's the thing. They weren't great, but they were in the competition. It was the New Zealand teams who, for the most part, were very, very good. The Blues, the Crusaders, and the Hurricanes were always in the semi-finals as well.
Always.
It's not as if... during that period, Australian rugby, the national team were pretty good. Would beat them for the most part, but, they'd always do well against South Africa and England, all the other teams and whatnot. They're always in the top 2 or 3 of the world. So if you're going to sit there and say, oh, well, if you strengthen up Super Rugby and get it back to its best and whatnot, well, it was at its best once. And Australian rugby still could only field 3 teams. It is not as if they won it every year.
Plus, the other thing about it, you bozos, is that it doesn't matter whether it's a good competition. No one's watching it. No one's buying it. Invest in Australian rugby and there's still no audience for it.
There's only one future. It is, and it's the same for us. And Australia will probably do this before us because they seem to be more of probably a revolutionary.
Let them go overseas. But put a caveat on it. You've got to have played X amount of Super Rugby seasons, X amount of NPC seasons, or X amount of games, right?
Yes.
And X amount of games for the All Blacks.
I agree with that.
That's it. So therefore, we're not sending our best players over. We're sending players that have established themselves here already. And so we still get 4 or 5 or 6 good years out of them. And then you can go and actually take a sabbatical.
Well, no. But you let them go overseas, but they can still play for us.
Yeah, they can still play for us. But you have to have played a certain amount of rugby here before you're allowed.
But if you're doing that, you've got to can Super Rugby. There's no point having Super Rugby and NPC if you're allowing pretty much the bulk of your best players away.
The great thing is that we all have confidence in the New Zealand National Administration at the moment.
The great thing is they don't have confidence in themselves because they accepted the findings of that review.
What is the answer for New Zealand netball? Is it as simple as saying put our players in the Aussie competition, or as Noeline just said to us before at 2 o'clock there, that if that's the case, you strip all the talent out of New Zealand?
Well, no, because they're still playing for the New Zealand teams, aren't they? They're just playing better competition.
Well, that means that then we have to get X amount of teams over there. Does New Zealand netball have the budget for this? I mean, New Zealand netball can't just throw 20 million at it like that. The New Zealand rugby threw at women's rugby, not wanting any return on that money. New Zealand netball doesn't have that cash. So right? They don't have that luxury.
The way the competition operated for, 6, 7, 8 years before they went back to the domestic model, that I'm guessing wasn't profitable for Netball New Zealand at the time. I mean, if it was, or if it can be, do that.
Or as I suggested, look, maybe the idea is to have 2 separate domestic competitions that dovetail into each other and players can actually swap over between the 2. Yeah. But you're going to have to get some financial backing.
They can do that. No, they can do that as it is, can't they?
Isn't this incredible? So Netball New Zealand have to worry about the bottom line. You see? And if they don't get a return on it, they can't do it. Whereas New Zealand Rugby, you just throw the cash around here, throw it around there.
Last year or the year before, Caitlin Bassett, who was Australia's best player, came and played for the Magic. Now, I don't know what it meant in terms of her eligibility to play for the Diamonds, but is there anything stopping any of those Australian players coming here and playing?
No.
But they won't want to. So what you'll need to do is have a competition between the 2 where you get our ANZ Premiership teams and then you get their Suncorp Super Netball teams and they play in a competition. And then, as you say, you have their own provincial competitions working underneath and you're feeding into it. Mirror what the NRL do with reserve grade.
No A-League players in the All White squad of 22. What does this tell you?
The A-League's not good.
It's never been good, mate.
No.
It's a 4th, 5th, 6th division competition.
I mean, to be fair,
that doesn't mean I don't like it, and that doesn't mean I don't like the Phoenix, because I do. But that's where it sits in world football. You know, Darren Basie's picking guys playing 3rd and 4th division Denmark football rather than the A-League.
In 2010, that World Cup team, Shane Smeltz played in the A-League. Tony Lockheed played in the A-League.
Yes, there's a couple of them. Who was the guy?
Mark
Ben
Peston,
who was the left
Ben Sigmund,
fullback?
he played for the Phoenix. Mark Peston played for the Phoenix.
Yep.
A lot of guys played in the A-League.
So what does this mean? Does this mean that all of a sudden the fruits of the college football program and that we're sending so many kids overseas playing in that are going on to play in Europe? We don't have guys playing in the top leagues of Europe. We've got 1 or 2, right? We've got Marko Stemenic who's playing for, Stefanovic. Stemenic.
Playing for Red Star Belgrade.
Right
he's playing in the Champions League.
He's playing in the Champions League. We've got Chris Wood playing Premier League, but we don't have a lot that are playing top leagues in Europe. They're playing 2nd or 3rd division. But those players are still deemed better than the A-League players playing here.
Absolutely.
Pick your Rugby World Cup semi-finalists. Give me the 4.
Okay, I've got to work out the pools. So to go France, New Zealand, Ireland, South Africa, Wales, Fiji, England, likely Argentina. So then England play Fiji, England win. Wales play Argentina. Wales, based on form, win. South Africa, I would think, beat France, assuming France are still beaten up. and Ireland will beat us. So that's South Africa, Ireland, England, Wales.
So I gone Saffers, Mix, Taffs, Poms, exactly the same. Agreeing all four. Antoine Dupont, is he going to play the quarterfinal with that face marks that makes him look like he's from Mad Max?
I think he will.
I think he will. Last topic then. Tay and Travis, you jealous? Are you jealous?
No.
Are they
dating?
It's
a weird couple.
Are they dating?
Yes, they're dating.
How do you know?
Well, they're doing things.
Well, how do you know?
Well, like, what was the first thing that he sent her a message, didn't he? Something like, "You rocked my show, let me rock yours," or something like that.
I know, there's a bit cheesy, but I actually thought that
they were already. There was something already going on because they would have done all they could to cover it up in a way.
And then you get some footage of, and this is Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, who is the tight end for the world champion Kansas City Chiefs. And there's some footage of them.
NFL champion Kansas City Chiefs.
World champion Kansas City.
Well, there's only one league.
And that's why they call it the world championship.
There's no teams from other countries coming to play them.
Isn't there a Canadian league and a European league?
Exactly, but they play with different rules.
And so they were walking through the dressing room and together, and then she's with his mother in his corporate suite, his own private corporate suite. Then they left in a convertible car afterwards, Lachlan.
It just feels very showy, doesn't it?
Well,
it doesn't feel like there's nothing organic.
They could never do it secretly.
There's nothing organic. It's a bit like, it's Charles and Diana, isn't it? Is it? I don't know.
Do you think it's an arranged marriage?
Not arranged, but it just feels so forced.
Well,
but did you see the video of them walking through the tunnel?
Yeah, they're not holding hands.
They're not holding hands.
Well, that's because if they did hold hands, people would be talking about it.
They are talking about it.
We're talking about it.
Devlin.
Every Tuesday on the program, HK Dub, that's Hakung Wong, joins us as we talk NFL. At FB Garbage Time, at Football Garbage Time. That's the man's Twitter handle. That's the man's podcast. We always review the round. His hopeless Bears, my hapless Commanders, and Tay and Travis, a love story. Should we be jealous? Well, I was 2-0 and I was sticking it to you hard. And then yesterday, our quarterback got sacked 4,000 times. And look, I'm not gonna take any pleasure at all about you guys getting absolutely belted at Taylor Swift Stadium, and we'll talk about that. But the
biggest news.
The greatest thing about this league and following this league is it sits you on your butt and it kicks you in the slats, and it can do it without warning. So let's first talk about your boys, your Bears, your 0-3. Can I say right now, let's give up on the playoffs, okay? Let's just make that statement right now.
Yeah, you can certainly say that. Let's go one step further. The only positive takeaway from the Bears game against the Chiefs, from a Bears perspective, is we are now have the odds-on favorite to have the number one pick in the NFL draft next year. So you got that, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay, you got a great quarterback. I thought this was your year, all of that kind of stuff. But the Chiefs are on another level again, aren't they? And the only thing worse than your performance yesterday was Travis Kelce's suit that he wore on his date with Taylor Swift.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, the fact of the matter is that he already has Taylor Swift, so he can wear whatever he wants, So really, it doesn't really matter. At that, Bill Belichick actually said, I believe it was Bill Belichick who said, Travis Kelce has a lot of great catches in his career. This might be his greatest one.
Oh, what a great quote from Belichick. Oh, that's just brilliant, isn't it? Look, we already know that they're a great side. They're the defending champs. They've won it a couple of times. So let's move on from them. Who else in the AFC is impressing you right now? And you've got to say Miami. I mean, what happened yesterday? No one scores 70 points. No one's allowed to score 70 points.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because Tua actually said afterwards that it wasn't they didn't intend to embarrass Denver as being a bad team. It just looked that way. I don't know what the difference is. I mean, you hang 70 on a team, you obviously are looking to embarrass the crap out of them. And that's exactly what they did. They're filing we've always said, right, even from last year, that the Miami Dolphins are a good team as long as Tua is healthy. And that is what's happening right here. But what we didn't see happening was Devon Achane kind of walking in. He had a lot of preseason hype as a running back a rookie running back that they were coming in this year. And he had an injury going into the first game, and he didn't have he only had like 2 touches last week. But he really broke out in a huge way this game, 233 total yards, 4 total touchdowns. And that's not including the fact that Raheem Mostert, their other running back, had 4 total touchdowns. So, at the end of the day, this offense, when it's heating, it's really on fire. But I don't think the defense gets enough love here, and their defense was really on point. But let's see it the way it is. The Broncos are bad, right? I mean, they may be not quite Chicago Bears bad, but they're pretty bad. And they're making some bad decisions, and they don't have any defense to speak of. They thought they were going to be a defensive team that ended up not being a defensive team. And they just failed to take advantage of the people who are playmakers on their team, like rookie wide receiver Marvin Mims, who obviously is incredibly explosive, but they just didn't know how to get him into any snap counts, which I have no idea why you don't get a guy like that who can blow the top off a defense more looks when you're down 20-70, when you're down by 50 points.
Yeah, okay.
So, at the end of the day, clearly the Broncos are bad, but you're right. The Dolphins are incredibly impressive.
You went to the opening game at Bears Stadium. Let's leave it there, right? But as I say, you're 0-3. Dude, I feel for you. I know I shouldn't. You're an NFC side. I should hate you, but I feel for you, man. Because, another season.
I appreciate that.
But it's just going to, we let them torture us like this?
Oh, man, I tell you, it is a horrible, horrible thing to be a Bears fan. But you know what? This is the thing. You look back at it, and this entire week was a complete crap show to begin with, right? We had the entire thing with our defensive coordinator, Alan Williams, resigning from being defensive coordinator for health reasons. And then there was all this ridiculous stuff on the internets saying that he was being raided by the FBI, and Peanut Tillman, one of our cornerbacks, was with the FBI and tipped off Hallis Hall. It was all sorts of nonsense there. It was crazy. And then, of course, Justin Fields kind of throwing the coaching under the bus earlier in the week and saying they let me play the way I play. There's too many voices in my head. Well, they let him play the way he's supposed to play, and he just did just about as good as he did last week. So, with all that out there, quite frankly, no matter who we played this week, we could have played the St. Mary's School of the Blind. We would have lost. So thank goodness we played the Chiefs, because that was going to be a loss no matter what. Let's get the pain off. Let's get it over with right away. It's like when you go to the dentist and you're like, listen, get my filling done and let me out of here, right? Let's get this done right away. So I'm glad we got that out of the way. But are the Bears going to win games this year? Not the way they're going to do it. Not the way they're doing it now. There's just no way. They are misusing their offense. Their defense is absolutely missing in action. And we have a quarterback that has zero confidence. So, I'm hoping that we get that first number one draft pick next year. That's the only thing I can hope for.
The ATM podcast, that's Mark Watson, broadcaster of much international acclaim. We've got much to talk about too, including, of course, the Wallabies and the whining and the hand-wringing and the tally-off tut-tut brigade. Why are so many people telling us not to have a little bit of fun at Australian rugby's expense? That's what fans do when a rival loses. As well as that, a little reflection on the Warrior season. The whining and hand-wringing and tally-off brigade. Aren't we allowed to have a bit of fun at the Wallabies and Australian rugby's expense? This is the worst side that I've ever seen in a green and gold jumper. They've been dumped out of the World Cup, and this is their earliest exit. Yet within 24 hours of us having a bit of a laugh about it, as you do with your sporting rivals, so many media types are now coming out and telling, oh no, Australian rugby needs to be strong. If they're not strong, it's going to cost New Zealand rugby. What a load of absolute toss, mate. They don't care about us. Mark, why should we care about them?
Yeah, look, I had to, I was a little bit saddened by what happened yesterday. I do want to see Australia playing well. I sort of maybe slightly disagree. I do think we need to have a strong Australia, with the state that New Zealand rugby's in. But yeah, look, I think we've got to worry about the state of our own game at the moment. We potentially could get knocked out in the quarterfinals. So what does that mean? Well, that
would make us the worst All Black side that's ever gone to a World Cup. That's the truth of it, because we've lost a pool game, which we've never done before. If we go out in the quarterfinals, that's our worst ever effort. So we are the worst team ever that we've sent overseas to a World Cup. Right?
And equally too, it really, as I say, all it does is means that we had 1 week longer at the tournament than perhaps Australia. And also the other thing that people have got to remember with Australia is too, man, they're up against the AFL, they're up against the NRL, they're up against the A-League, and football
swimming,
is big over there.
Cricket.
And then you've got all those other sports. We're here in New Zealand. Rugby's always had it their own way. And it's rugby's fault, and it's rugby's administration's fault for the state of the game in this country. So it's easy to laugh and look at Australia, but maybe they don't have the same expectation on their Wallaby team as we have on our All Blacks. I'd argue that we're in greater crisis than possibly what the Wallabies are. Now, I want us to win this World Cup. I desperately want us to win a quarterfinal. But the fear I have is it's just going to basically we're just going to cover up the cracks in the game here, and everybody's going to go, oh, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Look, we won the World Cup, and we know that, well, beyond that, the game is in terrible trouble here. But look, I think I said it a couple of weeks ago, we've got to stop swimming in the shallow end. But one of the biggest mistakes we made is getting rid of South Africa out of Super Rugby. I think one of the biggest mistakes Australian Rugby's made is by having 5 Super Rugby teams rather than 3. And this is what will happen with Australian Rugby. They'll do the big review. Eddie Jones might end up going. But then, again, we'll kick Super Rugby off, next season with the Rebels taking on Perth, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And nothing changes.
And they're the issues that actually do need to be addressed. Well, the problem is that we're now just getting to the point where we're playing ourselves, aren't we?
Let's wind it up and leave it with the Warriors, who were outplayed and outclassed by Brisbane, and they were outplayed and outclassed by Penrith, and there's no shame in that at all, because that's a Melbourne Storm side that got absolutely belted by both of those teams. Warriors legitimately were top 4, but the level to get up to those guys is going to take another leap again, and that's, a great position for the club to be in over summer, to think about, okay, how can we actually get there? But you got to bask in a bit of glory, mate, because it's been one hell of a ride, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. And I know that people eventually get sick of, the up the wahs and all of that kind of stuff, but I've loved it, because what it is it's just created a tribalism in New Zealand sport that I have wanted ever since I was involved with radio sport. The Phoenix have got a little bit of it, but they don't have enough fans, and they've never collectively taken over the country like the Warriors have this season. And I think, any time in your life where you can walk around the streets, and it doesn't matter who you walk past, you can say up the wahs and you'll get a reply. Isn't that cool? It's got to be celebrated, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And as we said a couple of weeks ago, it's now part of the Kiwi vernacular, isn't it? Along with neck minute, up the wahs. I was trying to think of any other catch cries, and I think probably bring back buck was one that's still around for a long time and will probably rear its head again at some point, just for nostalgic reasons. Now, look, as a country, as a nation, and things are tough. Inflation's high, petrol costs are brutal. We've come off the back of COVID, and we've had 12 months of just rain, which brings everybody into depression. That's what sport does, more so than the arts, more so than anything else. It gets people, it provides just some escapism, it provides a sense of nationalism, and it puts a smile on people's faces. And for too long, the Warriors have been the great underachievers of New Zealand sport. And finally, they've found a coach who understands about building a culture. They've had buy-in from the club, and that's then been supported by the fans. But it also just says to me that, there's so many excuses made in the past. We don't have the playing depth, or, people don't want to play here in New Zealand, or they're away from their families and all the rest of it. And that's just all rubbish. And that's been proven this year. But as you said, the most pleasing thing for me is the tribalism that we've seen out of it. Finally, we've got some, established songs and some anthems like you get, with Liverpool and You'll Never Walk Alone. And New Zealanders, we've always been so, we've always been a little bit shy, haven't we, as fans? And we've always put those little bit barriers up.
To hear the full interview, download the platform at the App Store. Via Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to the whole show and all of the interviews in full. That's our podcast for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to listen to the entire show, 1 till 4, Monday to Friday, download the Platform app, and via Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to whatever shows over however many weeks at your leisure, at your listening pleasure. Platform Plus. First thing to do, though, is download the Platform app.
Devlin.
You better believe it!
The Platform.